And now I've got an actual expert on everything COVID. He's taken every variation of the virus himself in order to make sure he got properly infected. He put his mouth right into a woman's anus. That is the primary place that you can get COVID if they have COVID. They got to have COVID first. If you just put your mouth into someone's anus and they don't have COVID, you're not going to get any COVID. But that information doesn't come from me. I got an actual doctor on the show in some sort of super biology. So let's introduce him, and he can actually tell us what the hell he does and how he knows things. But Mr. Dr. Bauer, thank you for joining us.
All right. Hey, Rob. Oh, shit, I'm bad at this. My name's Dr. Bauer. I work in the biotech industry studying blood, essentially, which overlaps a lot with immunology and vaccine development and things like that. So I live out here in Switzerland and love the show. I don't know.
Beautiful. And you said, just so that people get the full understanding of your technical expertise here, you're 2 months from your doctorate, but we're going to call you doctor anyways. And you actually do have knowledge in this field, unlike myself when I'm just, reading the newspaper and yelling about random bullshit I think makes sense to me. You actually do have some expertise here.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the first things that you hit me up about is that, in your opinion, or from what you're seeing of these vaccines, they're being purposely designed in a way where you would have to get one every 6 months. They could design these so that they actually worked and that you could be one and done. And then we can get into some of the health risks of taking a vaccine that would work. But let's just start with the starting point of that. In your opinion, these are purposely being designed for profit and in a way where you would have to get them at least once a year, if not more often than that. So I'll hand it over to you to explain to us what about the vaccines are you looking at to go, these are purposely designed for profit and not for, basically utility and just taking something and being done with this?
All right. So essentially, I have to start off by explaining a little bit about immunology and about immunizations and how immunity works. And in particular, I want to talk about a concept called cross immunity. And cross immunity is essentially what happens when you get exposed to one virus that is kind of like the virus you are afraid of, and you gain immunity to that one. If they have any sort of proteins or other structures in common that your immune system can learn to recognize, then when it learns to recognize the virus that you're not really afraid of, it simultaneously learns to recognize and fight the virus you are afraid of. So the first vaccine, for example, was against smallpox. And the way that vaccine worked is they rubbed a bunch of cow pus from cowpox pustules into cuts or something. I don't know. They injected them. It was a long time ago. I don't know. And because the cowpox vaccine had some proteins in common with the smallpox vaccine, the body learned to fight cowpox and simultaneously learned to fight smallpox. And the reason that works is because you have a lot of proteins. These things have a lot of proteins in common. They have a lot of structures in common that the body can learn to recognize. So with the COVID mRNA vaccine, the way it's structured is they take a single protein, this S spike protein that's used for docking with a specific enzyme, and they use mRNA to force your cells to produce it. So you get one protein, your body then learns to recognize that protein as being viral and fight it. But you're only getting one protein, as opposed to if you're exposed to COVID itself or an inert version of COVID, the body will learn to fight that protein, the S protein, and many others on the surface of this virus, right? So the reason that I actually think that is going to result in shorter lasting immunity is essentially that viruses mutate all the time. Viruses mutate all the time. That's where you hear about all these variants and things. And what people mean when they say that there's a mutation and a variant is that a protein has been modified through mutation, a single protein has been changed, but usually the other proteins are intact. So with the mRNA vaccine, your body is going to learn to attack just the spike protein, right? Whereas if you have natural COVID immunity, your body will have learned to attack like 10, 20, 15 other proteins associated with this virus. Since there's a kind of constant mutation rate, more or less, Oh, it doesn't take as long for, okay, let me restart that. The mutation rate of these viruses is fast, but is fast relative to other things, but it's not so fast that you're going to get a complete turnaround and a complete replacement of all the proteins on its surface in a year, for example. But a mutation in a single protein, like the S protein, could very easily happen. In fact, we already know that it's happened in several places. And since your body only knows how to fight that one protein, it's only going to know how to fight that one variant. Whereas if you're exposed naturally and your body learns to fight all of the proteins on this thing, you're going to have protection against the other variants. I don't know if I said that clearly.
No, a lot of information there. So let's just break a little bit of it down.
Yeah.
So the mRNA is a new style of vaccine. From what I understand, maybe they've been studying it for 6 or 7 years, but from what I understand, this is the first release of this technology. So first, is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first release of the technology as a vaccine. Actually, the methodology they're using is essentially the same as what we use in our lab to put RNA or DNA inside cells. We've been doing it for like 20 years.
So, but is it almost like a sales tactic to even call this a vaccine?
Yep.
Because it's not. A traditional vaccine is you're exposed to the actual virus in a different forms that you know how to fight off the more serious version of it. This is actually something different where they're calling it a vaccine because we already take vaccines. So it's like, it doesn't sound like you're dealing with a new technology. But the reality is it's not really a vaccine.
Yeah, it's supposed to have the same effect, but the structure is different. The implementation is different. The production is different. It's a new technology. The effect is supposed to be the same, and it makes sense that it should be close, but it's a different thing.
Okay, so dumb question. Yeah. I think at one point, and this is something that to me is yet to be clear. In your opinion, let's start with this question. An asymptomatic person, can they spread COVID?
Yeah, they could, in the same way that a person that's immune that kisses someone with COVID could give it to you by kissing you. Like, if it's on your hands or something, yes, but you're not going to spread it in the same way that you are if you're hacking up a lung in a taxi.
Okay, so at one point I read that I guess the extent by which you were going to have symptoms was also relative to just how much viral load you were exposed to, and that there is this factor of shed rate. So if someone's like super sick, they're sneezing and they're coughing, they're actually creating a lot of virus, and then I guess your symptoms and your body's ability to fight the virus is also relative to, if you're next to the guy who's sneezing and he gives you a big ass viral load, you might be super sick versus if it's an asymptomatic person, I shake their hand, put it in my mouth, I guess I might get COVID, but I won't necessarily have as many symptoms. Is that at all accurate?
That's pretty much accurate. I mean, okay, so I've been in science for too long. When I say yes, an asymptomatic person can spread it, I mean, essentially no, but they kind of train us to stop to say essentially no when we mean, yeah. Anyways, no, there's very little.
Why don't you speak to me on
any sort of symptoms from touching something or give someone symptoms because you touched a doorknob and then touched their doorknob. Like, the chances are very low.
So what are the let's just talk in percentage terms. I mean, what percentage of people, there's a number to it. Is it 1 in 100 will interact with a asymptomatic person and become sick? Is it 1 in a million? There's a number there. I mean,
it's going to be way lower than 1 in 100. Yeah, 1 in thousands, 10,000s. It would be difficult to measure.
Okay, so before I even move into this next question, and this is my scattered ADD brain, but I was watching Fauci today trying to take on what Rogan had said about giving the vaccines to children. And the argument against Rogan has been first people just going, well, you're not a doctor. But then they don't actually address his claims. They just say, hey, you're not a doctor. Then Fauci came on to actually address his claims. And what he said is, it's not just about you. It's about the fact that even if you're a child and you don't have symptoms, you can still spread the virus to another person. Now, first, he's not addressing the fact that once we make the vaccines readily available, if you actually believe that the vaccines work, so then anyone who is actually concerned with, COVID can either stay home or they can take the vaccine. So I don't buy his logic that we need to have everybody take this thing because they might spread to someone else. But in your opinion, when Fauci says, hey, a child that's asymptomatic might still go out there and spread, virus to other people, that statement is mostly false.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely mostly false, and it's worth noting that it would be really easy to test that, right? That's a really easy study to run. You have kids in schools that are getting it. It's really actually quite easy to study infection rates at schools, for example. And the fact that there have been no studies showing up saying that this is happening, that's the first indicator that no, it's absolutely not happening.
Okay, so now this is just, once again, me being probably a dumbass, but and this might just be loose dummy affiliations, but if we say that the shed rate that you're exposed to will also directly correlate to how sick you get, why don't they just create fucking nostril things and give you the smallest possible viral load? I don't understand why this isn't just as simple as a typical vaccine, where if I know that exposure to little shed rate also means little symptoms, so why not purposely expose yourself to someone who's nearly asymptomatic or very low? Can't you scientifically reproduce exposure to a low viral load at the rate at which you can predict that, based on your health level, you could beat it, and then you would just be immune from there on?
That's not exactly how it works, but your point that there are for sure that diminished versions of the virus could be produced very easily. In fact, there's a bunch of them in the pipelines. That's what a vaccine is, right? That point is absolutely right. We don't have to do this mRNA crap.
Okay,
so in fact, there's good reason to believe the mRNA crap is going to be significantly less effective in the long run.
Okay, so before we get into, you're saying an additional problem to the mRNA crap is that it really is only preparing your body to fend off single proteins. In your opinion, could this be designed in a way where I guess it was giving you exposure to more proteins that you would then be fully prepared to, I guess at least battle COVID for a longer time? Is there a more efficient way for them to deliver this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what a normal vaccine is, right? So the fact that they didn't have to switch to this mRNA format, they would have gotten more, let's say, a more diverse response profile, or a more diverse set of targets that your body would respond to by just giving you a normal COVID vaccine. And the coronavirus is part of a family of viruses that we have vaccines for. We know how to produce vaccines against members of the coronavirus family. There's not really any good reason I can think of, aside from the fact that it's cheaper, to produce the mRNA version. Right?
So I mean, that's a wild claim that, in other words, they're actually sitting on traditional vaccines that would work. They're more expensive, so they're pushing this other technology.
Well, I mean, they're not that much more expensive. But the important thing is that it's not really even a claim. You can go online and see companies that have the normal vaccine, normal version of the COVID vaccine in their pipeline in development, right now.
And are they just not getting the emergency authorization because they're not the big companies like your Pfizer or Moderna's?
I don't know.
Okay. So now going back to the mRNA, in your opinion, do you think that there's any dangers or because it is a new technology? That's what people are afraid of. They're saying, hey, this is a new technology. I don't trust Big Pharma. I don't trust Fauci. This got pushed through really quickly. I'd rather sit on the sidelines, let other people take it, and we'll see if some side effects are in the works. Do you think that the mRNA puts people at risk for some sort of side effects that we haven't seen yet?
mRNA all right. So there's two ways to look at this. There's the more reasonable way to look at it is that if the structure of the mRNA is exactly what they're telling us and has been confirmed, then there are some dangers that you could foresee. The danger in particular that's worth considering is that the protein that this mRNA produces is what the virus uses to stick to your cells, right? So that it doesn't just float away when they bump into each other, or to anchor itself to your cells. Now, that doesn't sound particularly dangerous, except if you're forcing your cells to produce a bunch of that protein and it's sticking out, you now have a cell that doesn't stick to other cells, that has been forced to gain the ability to stick to other cells. That, again, doesn't sound particularly bad until you realize that what you're describing is like essentially the perfect way to produce like clusters, aggregates of cells, and eventually blood clots. That's probably the first thing to worry about. Just my professional opinion, if I were designing a study to test the safety of these things, that's what I would check first. They didn't have to pick that particular protein to do this, so I don't know. I mean, that's
okay. So then, question for you. So the AstraZeneca was the first one that they were like recognizing blood clot issues with. Pfizer, Moderna, thus far, I don't believe there's been reports of blood clots. And Johnson & Johnson, which actually is, from what I understand, not an mRNA, has also been having the blood clot issues. So I guess why is it that the AstraZeneca would be having more of an issue than the Pfizer and Moderna?
Depends on the structure of the vaccine. It depends also on the vector that they use. So if you're forcing cells that are sort of stationary in your body that don't float around to stick to other cells, it's really not so bad. Whereas if you're forcing cells that are in your bloodstream all the time to stick to other cells, then that could potentially that would be a difference. So it really just depends on, and that would be determined by which vector they use to deliver the mRNA.
Okay, so other than blood clots, which we've already seen with AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson, still, just not to create too much panic. I mean, they are on a limited basis. Do you think that there's other potential side effects that we haven't seen yet that you could forecast are a possibility because of this new technology?
Well, okay. So, yes, this would be more speculative, though. The first thing, the next thing that I'd be worried about after blood clots with this vaccine is the fact that with a normal vaccine, you give the body something other than itself to learn to respond to, right? So it attacks the viral particle, the inert viral particle, and it just learns to target that. You just gain immunity to that. What they're doing with this mRNA vaccine is that they're actually forcing the cells that receive the mRNA to present a viral profile, to show themselves to the body in a way that the immune system will think of them as a virus, as infected. And my concern with that, and maybe this is much more speculative, but my concern with that would be that when you force immune cells to kill like your body cells and learn to recognize some components of them as dangerous, that they might then learn to recognize other components of them as dangerous. What I'm describing there is essentially the forced production or a higher rate, let's say, of autoimmune disorders. Now that's very speculative. The body has kind of redundancies in place to prevent that sort of thing from happening, because I mean that's essentially that's what viruses very frequently do anyways. But it makes me personally, it would make me nervous it would make me nervous to set up a situation where the immune system is being forced to recognize components of the body as potentially dangerous in a way that it doesn't normally do.
Okay, so last question on last question on these mRNAs, which let's say the Pfizer, Moderna, because those are the main ones being in the U.S. So you're working in this field. Obviously, you're pro science, you're pro technology. Your personal advice: would you look at these and say, "Hey, I think maybe you should wait because there could be some bad side effects coming down the road"? Or are we just really talking about really small chances here, and we're kind of talking about, extreme bad circumstances that are unlikely, And, in some sense, we're almost being anti-science by being focused on, tiny unforeseen consequences that are unlikely.
I mean, science is basically driven by critique of itself, right? That's the whole purpose. That's the whole point. Nothing that any scientist says should be taken just on its face, like show me the data. And that goes, anyone can say that without being anti-science, in my opinion. But my feeling on this, after reading about it and looking at the numbers, is that like Rogan got it exactly right in the podcast. Like, I don't know, if you're healthy, if you don't have comorbidities, if you're not in a risk group, the natural immunity is going to be way better in this case. And that's not a crazy anti-vax thing. We know natural immunity is better in these cases. We've studied it. This concept has been around for decades in a very quantitative way and in a qualitative way for like centuries. We know natural immunity is better than what you get from this sort of process. So if you're not in a risk group, get it, don't get it, I don't care. If you're in a risk group, consider it more strongly.
All right. When you say, when you talk about natural immunity, because I read this, which I thought was a fascinating anti-vax argument, but the source that I read it from was very iffy. So I wasn't 100% on it, but they were breaking down the math of when the Pfizer vaccine tells you that it will, boost your immunity to 95%. The part that they're not telling you is that your natural immunity is at 80% in certain age brackets. So really you're talking about a 15% boost to your immunity. And if you start weighing that against the risk of potentially, consequences down the line, that's a lot different. In other words, you're not going from 0 to 95. They're telling you your natural immunity plus the boost from their shot, right? So an AstraZeneca, for example, which, has been causing more blood clots and I think is at a 70%. So, that's going to do little for you above your natural immunity. Or if you're one of these people who 10% of people who have gotten the Pfizer, Moderna that aren't showing up for their second shots. So really you've basically exposed yourself to the risk of the virus to probably no actual health benefits. Is there some accuracy to that when they're reporting the number of the way it's helping you, they're also pricing in your natural immunity to that?
Yeah, I couldn't really confirm that. I'm not on that end of the analysis. That's more what statisticians say. I'm on the molecular biology side of things. But that seems plausible. I wouldn't discount it. That doesn't seem crazy to me that that's how they would calculate it.
All right. And then if you could just explain to us, so you're looking at these mRNAs and you're saying that I guess even at the current risk factors, they could be designed differently so that they would actually work for longer periods of time. And it appears to you like they're being designed in a way where you got to get them every 6 months, which obviously it becomes a renewable product. It's like selling people cigarettes. They got to buy a new one each week. You're going to make more money. Yes. So what are you seeing in these products that makes you think that they're purposely being built, to be kind of profit driven?
Well, it's just, like I said, there's the normal vaccine structure. Well, okay, the mRNA vaccine structure is it's easier for the virus to mutate around to defeat, right? By an order of magnitude, easier for the virus to defeat it. It does versus the normal vaccine.
Does that potentially
that way? I can't see any reason why you would go this route, why you would produce the vaccine in this way when we have all the tools, all the specialists, all of the protocols in place to develop or to just rapidly push out a normal vaccine, which wouldn't have which would be much, much harder for the virus to mutate around. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the sort of planned obsolescence.
Does that potentially make the virus stronger because you're giving it enough to work with? In other words, if you were to it almost sounds like we're letting the virus work out, where we're giving it little puzzles for it to solve and become stronger, as opposed to throwing a solution at it that it can't beat and then it dies off.
I mean, that's a possibility, right? There's a lot of evolutionary pressures at work when you talk about virus mutations and variant growth and spread, right? So yeah, the possibility that it will end up turning into something much nastier is there, but I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. Usually, what happens with viruses in species is that they actually become more like essentially over time viruses tend to become domesticated, right? As viruses that are stably exist in one population, in one species, usually can only do it because they just sort of let the people that have them walk around and spread it without knowing it. Or with like minimal symptoms and stuff. A virus that knocks you out and puts you on your ass in bed for a week and then goes away doesn't get spread as effectively as one that just sort of lives in happily. And whenever you're talking about like evolutionary pressures, you're talking about maximizing spread, right? So a docile, nice, kind version of a virus is going to spread much more effectively in the long run than one that puts you on your ass. It's only when you get a virus that jumps from one species to another that you tend to get these. They tend to be really nasty because they haven't really been domesticated by the host species at that point.
So stated differently, the virus kind of needs to learn how to live with us. It be a good roommate where we don't want to throw it out. Now, I just knowing nothing about viruses, and then we'll move on from the mRNA. To you, like, what the fuck? I know that they don't have a total understanding of it, but like, what the fuck is a virus? Like, what is it? So it's like a living thing that wants to duplicate itself the same as anything else, but like it needs a host. I don't know. It just seems to be like a weird little thing that even exists in our reality.
All right. So a virus is essentially a shell. You call it an envelope, but it's a shell. It's proteins and fats and stuff. It's a bubble. That has instructions inside it for making more of that bubble, but doesn't have, and this is a really like low level description, but doesn't have within itself the machinery to copy those instructions. So what a virus does is it puts the instructions for its own assembly inside your cells, and then those instructions hijack the machinery that exists inside your cells and force it to make more copies of the virus. So that's why it's not exactly alive. I mean, it's not alive in the traditional sense. It needs a host. It can't really do anything otherwise. They're more or less useless. But that's essentially the structure.
From an evolutionary perspective, though, what's the utility of it? Or like, how did it? Like, I understand how apes are interested in their own self-survival, and maybe they changed into the apes they are. But like, what's the starting point of like a virus even existing? I know that that's like a weird, maybe God question, but you know what I mean? It seems like most things kind of like, you know what I mean? Like even on like molecular levels, you got your protons that, they collide. Everything seems to kind of have a equal force working against it. So it's like, what's the utility of a virus if it's not its own like consciousness or something?
The utility. Yeah, that is a bit philosophical. That's not really how evolution works or that's not the dimension along which evolution works on a molecular level. You asked sort of how could it have started, like the first virus kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's a fine question as well.
All right. Yeah, I mean, once you have machines, molecular machines for creating instructions in this case are DNA or RNA or whatever,
it's like a computer glitch.
Wrong, right?
It's a computer glitch.
It's kind of like
in your blood.
Or it's probably closer, with that analogy, it's probably closer to just like some old script that won't die, Some old script you wrote, you were learning to program, you wrote something to, I don't know, wiggle your mouse to keep the screen alive or something like that. And you gave it the ability, and you've sort of propagated it through all of your computer exchanges throughout the years. And now all of your computers have it. I don't know. That's an okay analogy. But
I guess the weird part to it is just that it's like, I don't know, there's some fundamental aspect of everything on our planet that it wants to survive. And like, that's even true of the virus, that it's looking to like procreate, duplicate itself. Like it just wants to survive.
I mean, okay, so I would rephrase that slightly, not to get all debatey or whatever, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm an idiot. I'm just talking out of my ass. Like, I don't fucking
it's
know.
totally fine.
Yeah.
The everything on the planet wants to make copies of itself, essentially. If it doesn't, you know, 1,000 years from now, we won't know it existed. So, and a really good way to make a copy of yourself is to continue existing yourself, right? But that's not necessarily like that's not entirely necessary for making copies of yourself. Like proliferation is what we're all sort of what everything is optimized for, not necessarily like continued existence. It's just continued existence is a good strategy for proliferation.
Okay, so
If that makes
to
sense.
go to step away from my trippy, stoned out, nonsense talk about what the fuck a virus even is. So you were saying that in order to make the mRNAs like pretty foolproof, if they really were interested in killing off the virus, what would make sense, and I will play devil's advocate here and say I would be the first person calling bullshit and saying don't go do this. But you were saying that if they give you the single spike that can have you kill the current version of COVID, if a week later, once you have like your, super immunity, you actually exposed yourself to full-fledged corona, your body would defeat it and then have the entire profile by which you would have full immunity.
Yeah, I mean, look, for anyone listening, I'm not a medical doctor. Don't, consult your doctor, all that shit. Don't sue me and everything. But yeah, so if you have immunity to just the one spike protein from the virus, that'll provide some protection. That'll provide protection from the current version. But as soon as a variant arises that doesn't have that spike, you're fucked. However, if you have immunity, if you gain immunity to the full current variant, the full current version of the virus, the chances that won't have overlapping cause cross immunity, it's called, with other variants is just insanely low. So you're going to have immunity to a bit more immunity to variants that arise than you would from just the spike. So if you get your spike protein immunity, you need to find a way, or it's a good idea to find a way to expose yourself to the full virus to get the full immunity, right? And the only way really to do that is, go lick some street signs and finger somebody in the coronavirus ward. I don't know. Yeah, I think what I wrote. I think what I wrote.
You said like buttholes. That's what you told me. Yeah. You told me there's no viral load quite like a butthole.
Yeah, what I specifically told. Yeah, the best way, probably the most efficient way to get exposed to the virus is to go find somebody who has it, and that intubated people can't say no.
There you go. And then last question, and I'll let you go. So what went wrong with Johnson & Johnson? On paper, Johnson & Johnson looked like it was the closest to a traditional vaccine. A couple months ago, I was saying if I were to get one of these, I'd probably go the Johnson & Johnson route because it seems to be, at least on paper, from what I had seen, it was closer to a traditional vaccine. It was not this new mRNA technology. And so if you were reluctant to be involved in the global test study of mRNAs, Johnson & Johnson might make more sense. Now, it's looking like Johnson & Johnson, probably a little bit riskier just off the fact that it got pulled off the market for a couple of days. Maybe that was an overreaction, but I'll hand it back to you to explain to us what went wrong there and if maybe that one's a little bit better.
I wish I had an explanation for you. The truth is, I don't trust the numbers on any of this shit. I don't really see a good reason to believe that Johnson & Johnson is less likely to have side effects than the other ones or whatever. Like the numbers that are getting put out on these things are all skewed as far as I can tell. And that the skew in the data on these things goes all the way back to like March 2020. The information we were getting had perverse incentives all over the place. And it's just, there's perverse incentives in the information gathering surrounding this thing. So I don't have a good explanation. It sounds like it's just as likely to be political or, I don't know, some lawfare bullshit by other companies as it is that it actually will fuck your shit up. I have no idea.
Well, to speak to the truth to that, and I just, I'm not in the field, but I do read the newspaper every day, and you get these floating stories. AstraZeneca got busted for literally fabricating the evidence that got them their authorization now. They're not authorized and they're not actually being distributed in the U.S. However, the EU is still swearing by it, and they certainly got in trouble. Now, scope and scale, you can do your own research on how much they falsified, but like they got approval and they falsified their information. And on the same note, when it came to the hydroxychloroquine, the study that said that it was dangerous turned out to be certified false. That the doctor who had like signed off on it said, you got to take my name off that, because when he finally got to see all the information from the studies, he realized that it was totally fabricated. So just to like, as a person who's just reading the newspaper and casually trying to follow this to the best of his ability, and you got to realize that the most flagrant things are the only things that make it like the 5th or 6th page of a newspaper for me to even be aware of it. There's enough to suggest that, yes, there is some baloney information, even at the levels of the WHO, the FDA, or whoever's signing off on these.
Yeah, oh yeah. There's bullshit all over the place. I actually was relatively confident in the information that was coming out until I have this story. It won't take long. One of the professors at my institute is on the like Council for COVID Response or whatever here. And at the beginning of the pandemic, when we all got sent home to work, we had this big ass Zoom meeting with everyone coming together, and they gave this professor gave a presentation on the research they were doing on the epidemiology of the virus. And one of the things that they talked about at the beginning of the presentation was that was how they were deriving their statistics for like likelihood of spread and shit, right? And the way that they were gathering that information is they were just sort of testing everyone who showed up at the hospital for the virus to see how prevalent it was in the population. And they assume, and this professor specifically said out loud in the discussion that they assumed that was a random sample of the population. That might not seem immediately fucking stupid, but
that's a random sample of people that had to show up to the hospital for being sick.
Exactly. Yeah. That would be like saying that, we're just going to test everyone that gets intubated for COVID, and we'll assume that that's the proportion of the population that has it, and and then, everyone who dies from that will inform our figures on the mortality. And this is like a tenured professor saying this shit in the middle of, with 300 people, all of whom were qualified to call her out on this bullshit, saying that that's how she was deriving this information. And not a single fucking person did. Like, we were all given the opportunity to say, like, wait a second, that's not a random sample. That, your statistics are flawed to the point that if you were a master's student, we would like expel you for that sort of negligence. And since then, like, I just don't trust any of the numbers on these things. Like, all the people who analyze the data, they're, as far as I can tell, full of shit, right from the beginning. And then the people who gather information, who run the tests, like, as far as I can tell, there's plenty of perverse incentives there for people to inflate numbers here or deflate numbers there. Like, the whole structure of information gathering surrounding this is fucked, and has been for a very, very long time. So yeah,
all right,
not having any clue of what's going on, because I don't really have any clue either. Assuming all the numbers are bullshit.
So let's put on our conspiracy theory hat. So we've got the machines at work falsifying numbers, making it seem like you got a virus that's more deadly than it is, and like you've got vaccines that are better at treating it than they are. Yeah. Do you think that this is Fauci working with Big Pharma, trying to get, the exact kind of vaccines that he's able, or the industry is able to profit from, and at some point, he retires from government, gets a big paycheck, and that's it? It was just evil people trying to make some huge money off of pushing along mRNA vaccines? Do you think maybe it's even more nefarious, where some socialists really want one world government and some big time control? So, they saw an opportunity here with this virus to really play up just how deadly it was, to try and seem like, hey, if you don't give government more control of your lives, look at this risk of death? Or do you think that this thing just, nothing that crazy happened, it just kind of spiraled out of control? Pfizer sees its opportunity for profit. Like, people just saw their opportunity. Maybe at the beginning, people saw their opportunity to get rid of Trump, even though I don't know why every other government would get in on that and also shut down their countries. So
Yeah.
I'll hand it back to you. If you're just going to be a pure conspiracy theorist, why do you think the system's at work here to play this thing up and play up that the vaccines will help?
I mean, there's a shitload of people making a shitload more money now than they were a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's actually the most powerful industries. All of big tech profits are up.
Yeah.
So, they want people shopping at home and not doing anything but being online. So it's almost like, you're right. It's like most of your people who were in power were able to grab more power.
Yeah. So you have that, you have the money. And then, I mean, you mentioned, or you talked about how other countries wouldn't really have an incentive to lock down or to go along with all this crap. But I mean, I don't know if you remember the yellow vest people in France. I mean, that was immediately before COVID. I remember seeing some footage of some train stations or banks and stuff in Chile being burnt down like in November before COVID. Things weren't going particularly well in a lot of places before COVID, and now, I mean, yeah, sure, there's riots and stuff, but I think I don't think it's necessarily true that other countries wouldn't have a reason to lock down before COVID. So there's that. There's the political influence. That's for sure there. There's the money. Whether there's like a one world government or something, like that's a fun idea to play with. I play with that idea a lot. But I don't know. I mean, I don't really see a reason why all of the things you just described couldn't be happening simultaneously. None of them are mutually exclusive.
Fair enough. All right. I think we covered. Oh, wait. No. No, I think we covered it all. I think we got into everything. Actually turned out to be a much longer segment than I was expecting. Before I let you go, anything else you wanted to cover or throw out there for the Run Your Mouth fans?
No, that's about it. Sorry it took so long. They
Not a problem for me.
They turn us into scientists. They make us talk like motherfuckers. So
I appreciate you coming on, and you know what? I'm gonna sum this thing up in my philosophy for the show for everyone listening. Dr. Bauer, you can take it or leave it whether or not he is a real expert. My take on this is that fortunately for me, I now work in a career where I get to say offensive things, and I try and profit off of that. And I probably can't go work a traditional office job. I don't want anyone coming in here and putting their financial ability to make, like, you got to make a living in life and make as much money as you can. I don't want anyone coming in here and speaking their mind and having to lose their career. Like, that's just not, like, that's not fun to me. That doesn't make the show fun. You know what I mean? That's not what I'm looking for. And I also like the idea of someone being able to call in and pretending like they're an expert for a full 45 minutes and just lying to me. I think that is funny, and I have no problem with it. And I think if anything, what I'm trying to do is I'm asking questions, and I'm a fan of critical reasoning. So this is up to you and your interpretation. You can listen to this whole interview. You can call bullshit on Dr. Bauer. You can think I have a friend that just called in and just spun that, and it's completely not true. Or you can take it for granted, or you can take our word for it that he's in fact an expert and this is his analysis. But I will say that I firmly stand behind people coming onto the show in an anonymous fashion. And I'm going to keep that as the format forever moving forward. And I do hope that someone takes me up on the bullshit challenge and calls in as an expert, because to me, that's just funny, and I take no issue with it.
Well, if anyone has any objections to what I said, just keep in mind, I kept this relatively low level. I didn't go into much detail, so go fuck yourself if you think anything like that. This is all basic immunology 101. Yeah. Not you personally, go fuck yourself. You're awesome. Love the podcast. I just mean anyone that's complaining about what I say.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. I'm gonna end it here, but dude, thanks so much. That was great. I thought we were gonna do like 15, but that was all fascinating. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Good. I hope you liked it. Yeah.
All right. How do you found Run Your Mouth through part of the problem?
No, actually, I found you guys through the Fadcast.
Oh, hell yeah, dude! You're OG, man. That goes way back.
Yeah, you gotta go back, man.
What, back onto the Fadcast?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going down there for for Childerberg. Awesome. So, Carr, I've kept in touch with a bunch. Is the Chicken Man still on that show? I haven't heard from him in a while.
Oh yeah, he's still there.
Okay. He's in Astoria. I got to hang out with him sometime. He's not that far from me, but Dr. Carr I speak to on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, no. Berg sounds like he'd be fun to hang out with. So, Yeah, yeah, you should, and I can live vicariously through you that way.
There you go. I got to track him down. He was in Queens the last I spoke to him, so he's not far. But I kind of liked pretending like I resented him, and so I was keeping that going.
Oh yeah, that's a good move.
Is he going down for Childerberg?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he's coming to Texas. I don't know how much of a bitch that is from Switzerland amongst COVID,
dude,
but it's gonna be fun.
That would be a real pain in the ass, I think.
Yeah.
I would love to, but I don't think it's going to happen. There was some talk on Twitter a while ago about like a European Childerberg, which I actually think could be really lame. But
is their audience that big that they can pull a European event together?
No, I'm pretty sure it's just like the 6 Europeans that routinely go on their show.
Hell yeah. All right. This was awesome. Thanks so much. Have a good one, dude.
Yeah, man. Have a good one. Ciao.
Peace.
Bye.